In this video, we'll discuss some common gotchas and things to consider before kicking off your training. The first big important thing to consider when training CopyCat is the range of values of your input image. Machine learning typically expects data to be in the range of 0 to 1. Saying that, there isn't a hard cutoff at 1, so having some values outside of this range that lie close to 1 won't have a detrimental effect on your training. But having excessive super wide values, pixels with values of 5, 10 or higher, can skew training. So to combat this, you can do one of two things. If the effect you're trying to learn with CopyCat doesn't affect these super wide regions, you can clamp the super wide values before training. So you can do this with the clamp node to ensure that the pixel values stay within that optimal 0 to 1 range. Then after training, when you apply the model to the clamped footage using the inference node, you can always comp your super wide pixels back into the final result. If, on the other hand, you want CopyCat to work on super wide pixels, you can convert your input and ground truth images to a logarithmic color space and train using those. One thing of note about this approach is that when converting to a log space, the colour values of the image will be compressed and have a smaller range. So it may take CopyCat longer to train to distinguish between these pixel values. Another important thing to consider when training CopyCat is the colour space that you train in. You should always train your model in the same colour space that you intend to run inference in, and vice versa. So if you train with images in Rec 709 colour space, make sure that the images you pass to the inference node are also in Rec 709. And the final training tip I have is to always double check the input and ground truth channels in your CopyCat node before hitting train. Sometimes you can accidentally add an alpha channel to your input or ground truth images when they're not needed. And this would mean that CopyCat is training an extra channel that it doesn't need, which can slow down training. So before you click train, just double check that you've only used the channels that you intended to use. So in summary, to ensure pixel values are in the correct 0 to 1 range for training, clamp super wide values or use a logarithmic colour space. Always ensure the colour space that you train in and the colour space that you run inference in are the same. And double check your input and ground truth channels before clicking train.